You could feel the heat rising off the pavement that evening, the kind of sticky July warmth that never really leaves your skin. In the tiny town of Ridgefield, North Carolina, summer had a way of slowing everything down. Neighbors chatted from their driveways, kids dragged the last hours of daylight out of the sky, and nobody locked their doors until well after dark. But that fragile bubble, warm, predictable, safe, burst the night 11-year-old Ava Kellerman walked out of Ridgefield Community Chapel and simply never made it home. Ava wasn't the kind of kid anyone worried about. Sweet, polite, quiet to a fault. A kid who wore her backpack straps tight and always looked both ways twice before crossing the road. She'd gone to the chapel for the Wednesday youth program, made a clay leaf dish during crafts, and hugged her best friend goodbye under the yellow porch lights. She only lived 4 blocks away. 4 easy blocks. A route she'd walked 100 times. At 7:52 p.m., she stepped off the church's front walkway. At 7:58, someone passing by saw her turn onto Willow Bend Road. And by 8:05, she was gone. Her mother, Laura Kellerman, started to worry when Ava missed dinner by even a few minutes. She always called if she lingered too long at a neighbor's house. By 8:20, Laura stepped out onto the porch, calling her daughter's name down the street. By 8:35, Ava's father, Mark, was circling the blocks, scanning yards, driveways, front porches, even the community garden behind the old school. Nothing. By 9:02, the Ridgefield Police Department received the call, Laura's voice trembling, breath caught between panic and disbelief. Officer Brett Harmon arrived first, his cruiser's lights blurring across the cul-de-sacs. He knew Ava, knew the family, knew the town well enough to swear things like this just didn't happen here. Within an hour, almost the entire department was canvassing the area. Neighbors pulled on shoes and grabbed flashlights. Kids were rushed inside. Porch lights flicked on all at once, like the whole street was holding its breath. The woods east of Willow Bend rustled with volunteers calling Ava's name. They found fallen branches, fox tracks, and an old rusted bike someone had ditched years earlier, but no footprints that matched hers, and no sign she'd ever taken a step past where she was last seen. Then, on the second morning, just after sunrise, a search team spotted something in a marshy ditch along the tree line, a small object caught against a clump of reeds. It was Ava's notebook, still sealed in a plastic zip pouch she always kept in her bag to protect her drawings. The pouch was muddy but unbroken. Her colored pencils were scattered around it, water-stained but untouched. No drag marks, no torn pages, no signs that anyone had forced the bag open or rifled through it. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. Why leave the pouch behind but not the backpack? Why dump something so carefully sealed? Why there, barely 40 feet from the main road, in a spot anyone could stumble across? Detectives could feel the unease creeping in, like a cold wind cutting through the summer heat. Something about it felt deliberate, placed, almost too neat. Rumors sprouted overnight. A gray sedan was seen near the chapel earlier that evening. Someone said it looked unfamiliar. A man in a ball cap walking a dog he didn't seem to actually have. A strange figure near the abandoned sawmill. Every whispered theory seemed possible and impossible at the same time. People in Ridgefield, the kind who usually waved at passing cars and trusted the world blindly, suddenly glanced over their shoulders at the grocery store and locked their windows before bed. Days passed, then a week. The search radius expanded to the river. Bloodhounds were brought in from Raleigh. State troopers walked shoulder to shoulder through poison oak and swamp grass. A helicopter circled the entire ridge, the blades slicing the air over the quiet town like a warning. Still nothing.
Then a tip came in. Someone swore they saw a girl matching Ava's description near a rest stop outside Asheville. Another caller claimed she saw Ava at a gas station with a man who looked shifty. Both reports collapsed within hours. Wrong girl. Misremembered hair color. A stranger buying snacks who left before officers arrived. The case, already thin, began to crumble. Meanwhile, Laura and Mark Kellerman lived inside a hollowed-out version of their home. The clay dish Ava made was still on the counter. Her shoes still lined up beside the front door. Her bedroom stayed untouched. The quilt neatly folded, the stuffed fox she slept with propped against her pillow. The windows still decorated with the sun catcher she made in 4th grade. Mark stopped going to work for weeks. Laura stopped sleeping more than an hour or two at a time. Every ring of the phone made their hearts jump. Every quiet moment reminded them that silence can feel like a living thing when it fills a house the way grief does. By the end of that summer, Ridgefield's police chief held a press conference he never imagined giving. No suspects, no leads, no answers. Just a plea for the public to keep calling in tips, even small ones. But eventually, the calls slowed, reporters drifted away, posters curled at the edges. New families moved into town without knowing where Ava Kellerman once walked. New kids rode their bikes past the chapel without realizing people used to gather there every year for candlelight vigils. Time didn't heal anything, it just moved forward. By the early 2000s, the case file was as thick as a phone book, its pages yellowing and brittle. Detectives transferred in and out of the department, each taking a turn trying to resurrect the investigation, but nothing budged. Everything was too old, too thin, too quiet. Until 2022, when a single scrap of overlooked evidence, something tossed aside, forgotten, logged without meaning, was tested using brand new technology designed to uncover family DNA matches through microscopic biological residue. And that scrap of evidence didn't just reopen Ava Kellerman's cold case. It set fire to the story Ridgefield thought it had buried for good. The evidence room in the Ridgefield Police Department was the kind of place people forgot existed. Dim, cramped, and lined with metal shelves holding boxes no one had touched in decades. Dust softened the edges of old labels, heat collected near the ceiling, and in the far right corner, squeezed behind a stack of abandoned narcotics cases, sat a faded plastic bin labeled Kellerman A, 1994. Inside that bin was a single item that investigators had never bothered to do anything with: a flattened paper cup retrieved from the marsh ditch the morning Ava's notebook was found. At the time, it had been considered irrelevant junk, the kind of litter that collects anywhere water gathers. There was no reason to think it mattered. It didn't match anything Ava owned. It wasn't near any obvious sign of a struggle. There were no prints. It was just trash. But in 2022, nearly 28 years later, a young forensic analyst at the state lab, Nina Caldwell, fresh out of graduate school and hungry to make a mark, requested to pilot a new program using advanced surface DNA recovery. It was a method that didn't need a whole fingerprint, a hair root, or even a drop of blood. It searched for microscopic sweat deposits, shed skin cells, biological shadows left behind on porous surfaces. She asked for cold case items with unknown biological residue. Ridgefield sent the cup. They didn't expect anything. No one really did anymore. It was just one more thing to check before packing the file back into the archives. 2 weeks later, Nina stared at her computer monitor frozen. The DNA pulled from the lip of the cup didn't match anyone in the national database. But the family match did, a near-perfect hit to a man who had submitted his DNA following a minor plea deal in 2009. The relative's name? Dylan Mercer. He had a brother who, according to an old rental record, lived in Ridgefield back in 1994. A brother whose name was Ethan Mercer. A name that had appeared exactly once in the original case file, scribbled into a witness call log from the year Ava vanished. No one had ever followed up on it. When the lab notified Ridgefield PD, the message hit the department like a thunderclap. The cold case detective leading the part-time review, Detective Leah Brannon, dropped her coffee when she heard. She had been 8 years old when Ava disappeared. Her parents used to tell her to hold their hands tighter when they walked to the car after church. Ridgefield didn't scare easily, but the Kellerman case had lived under the town's skin for decades. And now, suddenly, the past wasn't just back. It was standing at her doorstep, breathing. Brandon reopened the entire file. She studied every page, every note, every crossed-out lead. The cup wasn't found inside Ava's belongings. It wasn't seen at the chapel. It was discovered near the ditch, in the same general area where her notebook had turned up. An area searched repeatedly, but never fully understood. If the cup held Mercer DNA, the question was simple. Was Ethan Mercer anywhere near Ava the night she vanished? And if he was, why didn't anyone know? The first thing Brannon did was pull every record she could find on Ethan. It wasn't much. Back in 1994, he was 24, worked part-time at a hardware store off Highway 12, rented a small duplex on the eastern edge of town, and had one minor trespassing citation from his teenage years. Nothing violent, nothing out of place. No one had ever labeled him a suspect or even a person of interest. He had simply existed in Ridgefield like thousands of others, quiet, unremarkable, invisible. But he had a brother whose DNA flagged the test. The next morning, Brannon drove to a small house 20 minutes outside Raleigh where the brother, Dylan, now lived. He was polite, guarded, confused when she explained the match. He hadn't seen Ethan in years. The more she asked, the more Dylan's foot tapped against the kitchen floor. Then came the sentence that made Brannon's pulse hitch. "You're not going to find him," Dylan said. Ethan died in 2003. Dead. Buried. Gone almost 20 years. At first, Brannon felt something close to relief. If Ethan was dead, he wasn't a threat. But then her stomach twisted. If Ethan had been alive when Ava vanished and died before anyone knew he was connected to the case, then what had Ridgefield missed? Dylan offered little else. Just a memory of Ethan spending time near the old quarry that summer. Some vague recollection of him mentioning the youth group that met at the chapel. Nothing concrete. But when Brannon asked him why Ethan's name had shown up in a witness note nearly 3 decades earlier, Dylan blinked twice, as if trying to replay a memory he'd tried for years to forget. I think he called the police," Dylan murmured, "after the girl went missing." "Why?" asked Brannon. "I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. Just said he saw something he shouldn't have." Brannon froze. If that were true, then Ethan Mercer wasn't just in Ridgefield the night Ava disappeared. He might have been a witness. And someone had ignored that call. Back at the Ridgefield station, Brannon dug out the original hotline logs. There it was. Mercer, E. Saw activity near Willow Bend. A note that ended with a thin hand-drawn slash and the word uncorroborated. No follow-up. No interview. No second look. Someone dismissed Ethan Mercer's call as quickly as they wrote it down. Brannon stared at that note for a long time, wondering who had drawn that slash, wondering why the original investigator never knocked on Ethan's door, why a potential sighting had been buried beneath dozens of meaningless tips, why a man who tried to come forward ended up forgotten. She didn't have answers yet, but she had momentum, and momentum in a cold case this old was something close to a miracle. That evening, Brannon visited the old duplex where Ethan once lived. The building sagged with age, vines crawling across chipped siding, windows clouded with dust. No one had lived there in years. When she walked around the back, her boot crunched over shattered glass. The backyard was overgrown, a jungle of weeds and wild blackberry bushes. But as she moved closer to the fence, she noticed something odd. Small patches of disturbed soil where the earth seemed softer, almost sunken. Not fresh. Old. Very old. She crouched down, brushed her hand across the dirt, and felt something rigid beneath the surface. Metal. Thin. Flat. It took a few minutes of careful digging to uncover it. A rusted tin box, crushed slightly at the corners, its hinges nearly fused shut. She didn't open it there. She didn't dare. Instead, she slipped it into an evidence bag, sealed it, and held it tight against her chest on the walk back to her car. Whatever was inside that box had been buried behind Ethan's home for decades, and something in Brannon's gut told her it wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be random, and it wasn't going to be painless.
The evidence lab was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that sinks into your bones. Detective Leah Brannon stood behind the glass partition, arms folded, as a technician carefully pried open the rusted tin box she dug up behind Ethan Mercer's old duplex. For nearly 30 years, that box had been sealed in the dirt,
its metal warped, its edges fused from rain, heat, and time. The technician twisted his tool gently, muttering under his breath. Then, with a soft metallic snap, the lid cracked open. A faint smell of damp paper drifted out. The contents were simple, ordinary even, but the moment Brannon saw them, her pulse flickered. Inside were 4 Polaroid photographs, faded but still legible. Each one showed the same stretch of Willow Bend Road, the road Ava Kellerman had walked the night she vanished. The angles were different, one from behind the hedges, one from across the street, one closer to the chapel, one taken from the edge of the tree line. Brannon stared. The photos were all dated in black ink at the bottom. July 13th, 1994. July 20th, 1994. July 27th, 1994. August 3rd, 1994. A week apart. Every one of them taken on a Wednesday. Ava disappeared on August 10th, another Wednesday. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. The technician lifted something else from the box, something wrapped in a decayed piece of fabric. He carefully peeled the material back, revealing a worn keychain with a cracked plastic charm shaped like a fox. It was discolored from moisture, warped slightly. Brannon recognized it instantly. Ava's mother had mentioned it during an interview years earlier. "My husband bought her a keychain with a fox on it. She hung it on her backpack every day." But Ava's backpack had never been found. Brannon felt the cold air of the lab tighten around her. This wasn't random, this wasn't accidental, and this wasn't just a buried box.
Whatever Ethan Mercer had seen, or done, he'd hidden the evidence behind his home, sealed it away like a confession made of dirt and silence. But then, why hadn't he come forward louder? Why only that one strange call logged and dismissed? Why bury the photographs? Why keep the keychain? And why had someone written the dates so carefully? Brannon studied the photos again. Each image was taken around dusk. Each showed where the youth program kids would walk home. And in the last photo, August 3rd, the one taken a week before Ava vanished, there was a shape in the distant background. Hard to see, faint. Another person. A silhouette near the row of mailbox posts. Brannon leaned closer. The technician enhanced the section, pulling the digital image up on a screen. The silhouette was tall, broad, wearing what looked like a jacket despite the summer heat. But the detail that caught her eye wasn't the size. It was the badge-shaped glint near the person's chest. Something small, metallic, reflecting the fading daylight. She swallowed hard. A badge? No, it couldn't be. She grabbed the box again, checking the interior. Something scratched the metal at the bottom, a small embedded fleck of brass. She pried it loose. It was part of a broken key, the bow stamped with a faint circle, some kind of manufacturer's mark. She bagged it immediately. The box was no longer just evidence. It was a breadcrumb trail Ethan Mercer had left behind, one that someone had hoped would never be uncovered. She needed answers. And there was one person who might know more about Ethan than anyone else, his former landlord. Brannon drove across town to the edge of Ridgefield, where a weathered farmhouse sat beneath a line of old oaks. Miriam Holt, the woman who'd managed the duplex properties for 30 years, stepped onto her porch with a cautious smile. Her silver hair was tied back with a printed bandana. She recognized Brannon right away. "I heard the Kellerman case is being looked at again," Miriam murmured, her hands tightening around her mug. "I always prayed that girl would come home." Brannon asked about Ethan Mercer. Miriam nodded slowly. "He kept to himself, paid rent on time. That's all most landlords care about, I suppose." "What was he like personally?" Brannon pressed. She hesitated. Quiet, nervous sometimes, like he was always listening for something. "Did he have visitors?" Brannon asked. She thought for a long moment. "There was one man who came around now and then," Miriam finally said. "Older, wore a uniform sometimes. Not police, I don't think. Maybe security? He had one of those little gold pins on his chest." "Do you remember his name?" Brannon asked. "Only his first. He told me once, 'Name's Walter.' That was years ago. I never saw him after 95. A uniform, a man named Walter, a pin on his chest. Brandon felt something uncoil in her stomach, a slow, uneasy dread. The silhouette in the photograph wasn't just a stranger. It might have been someone with authority, someone who could walk down a street on a summer night and never be questioned. "Do you know where I can find this Walter now?" Brandon asked. But Miriam shook her head. "He moved away, or left, or—" She trailed off, eyes distant. "Sometimes I think about him and get this feeling he wasn't supposed to be here to begin with." Brandon returned to her car with her mind racing. If Ethan had taken photos, if he'd tracked someone, if he kept Ava's keychain, then he wasn't stalking her. He had been watching someone else. Someone dangerous. Someone who didn't want the truth found. And that meant one thing. The past hadn't just returned. It was warding her.
Detective Leah Brannon didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table with the case file spread out in front of her, photographs fanned across the wood like a deck of cards with a losing hand. The tin box, the photos, the Fox keychain, the handwriting slash, and the name Walter Griggs, a man who had vanished from Ridgefield's collective memory so cleanly it was like he'd never lived there at all. By 4 a.m., she had made her decision. She needed to find him, dead or alive, past or present. Whatever Walter had done or hidden was tied to Ava Kellerman's disappearance, and nothing moved forward until she knew why. At dawn, Brannon drove back to the station. The parking lot was still dark. Only one other car was there, Chief Ron Hensley's. The chief was in his office, leaning back in his chair with a half-empty cup of coffee when she walked in. "You look like you slept in your clothes," he muttered. "Didn't sleep. I need to reopen an old personnel file. From 1994. Chief Hensley raised an eyebrow. "Whose? Walter Griggs?" For a moment, just a second, the chief's expression tightened, something like hesitation, or memory, or discomfort flickering across his features. But it was gone before Brannon could place it. "Haven't heard that name in forever," he said, standing up. "Follow me." They walked to the archives room together. The chief unlocked a tall cabinet filled with yellow file folders. Dust billowed as he slid one open. Griggs. Here." He handed her the file. It was thin, almost suspiciously thin. Inside were standard employment forms, a single performance evaluation, and a resignation letter dated January 9th, 1995, 5 months after Ava disappeared. The letter was typed, short, and eerily vague. "I am resigning effective immediately due to unexpected family obligations requiring relocation. Thank you for the opportunity to serve." That was it. No forwarding address. No home contact. No explanation. She narrowed her eyes. Did anyone verify the reason he left? Hensley shrugged. Different time back then. Not many questions asked. She pressed. Was Griggs ever connected to the Kellerman investigation? Hensley hesitated again. Longer this time. He, manned some of the hotline calls early on, but he wasn't involved in the field search. Not that I remember. She didn't believe him.
Not completely. She left the office with the file in hand, adrenaline rising. Something was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong, and for the first time she felt the weight of the case pushing back, like someone from the past didn't want her prying too deeply into the cracks. She drove to Raleigh next, to the last known address listed in Griggs' employment records. It was a boarded-up duplex, long abandoned. Neighbors remembered him vaguely, a man who kept odd hours, never stayed long, didn't talk much. One neighbor, a retired mail carrier, recalled seeing him carrying boxes into the home one night and leaving abruptly 2 days later. Did he have family? Brannon asked. The mail carrier shook his head. Not around here. I always thought he seemed rootless. Rootless was a generous word, but Brannon wasn't leaving Raleigh empty-handed. She pulled DMV records, public listings, old payroll databases.
The digital trail was thin, almost non-existent. It was as if every trace of Walter Griggs had been scrubbed clean. Almost. There was one hit. A 2002 employment record for a private security job in South Carolina. A short-lived one. And then nothing again for 20 years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to follow. Before she left Raleigh, Brannon made one more stop, the Kellerman home. Laura and Mark still lived there. The house felt frozen in time. Same blue shutters, same wind chimes on the porch, same flowers planted along the walkway. When Laura opened the door, the years fell away. There was grief in her eyes, but also something else. Curiosity. Hope, maybe. "Detective Brannon?" she asked softly. "Is there news?" "I can't discuss the ongoing details, but I need to ask a few questions about Ava." Laura stepped aside and let her in. The living room was filled with photos. Ava laughing on her 11th birthday, Ava holding her soccer trophy, Ava in a Halloween costume. Seeing her smiling in every frame was a punch to the heart. "I need to ask about something Ava owned," Brannon said, pulling up a photo of the fox keychain from the tin box. "Did she have one like this?" Laura's breath caught. "Yes, she did. She hung it on her backpack. She loved foxes." "Did she ever lose it? Misplace it? Leave it somewhere?" "No. Ava never lost anything. And that keychain, she treated it like treasure." Brannon leaned forward. "Did anyone else know she had it?" "A few family friends, maybe. Her teachers, people at church." "Why?" Brannon hesitated, unsure how much she could reveal. "We found it," she said softly. Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Where?" "In a location connected to a new lead." Laura covered her mouth. She looked simultaneously devastated and relieved. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on her." "I won't," Brannon said. She meant it. Later that evening, Brannon drove back to Ridgefield. She stopped by the duplex one more time, staring at the backyard where she'd found the tin box. She couldn't shake the question. Why did Ethan bury evidence? To protect himself? Or to protect someone else? Her phone buzzed. A call from the forensic lab. She answered immediately. "Brannon." The technician sounded breathless. "We analyzed the rusted key fragment from the box. It belongs to a lock made by a company called Redline Storage Systems. And that lock wasn't used on residential doors. It was used for secure personal lockboxes and portable file safes." Brannon felt a familiar chill. The key was to a lockbox. A lockbox someone had opened or destroyed. "What about the brass residue in the box?" she asked. "We tested it. Same alloy. It likely came from the lock mechanism." "So the box originally held something locked inside." "Yes. And someone opened it," Brannon murmured, "before burying it." There was a beat of silence. Then the technician added, "We also found trace ash on the metal. Processed wood ash from manufactured materials, like a burned object or a burned lockbox." "Thank you," Brannon said, hanging up. She stared at the dark yard behind the duplex. Someone had burned a lockbox, destroyed what was inside, and buried the remains. And the only person who might have known what was in it, Ethan Mercer, was dead. But Brannon's instinct screamed that Ethan hadn't destroyed that box. He'd hidden it. Someone else had burned what was inside. Someone who wanted the truth gone. Someone who made sure Ethan's call never mattered. Someone like a policeman with a badge. Walter Griggs. But as Brannon turned to leave, she saw something shift in the corner of her vision. Movement in the shadow near the tree line. A figure watching her. Just a silhouette. Still. Silent. Silent.
Her heart thundered. "Hello?" she called out. The figure stepped back into the darkness and vanished.
Detective Leah Brannon didn't move for several seconds. The place where the silhouette had stood, just beyond the tree line, looked ordinary now. Empty. Still. But her instincts weren't wrong. Someone had been there. Someone who knew how to stand in the shadows and let darkness swallow them whole.
A twig cracked somewhere deeper in the woods. Brannon's hand went to her holster, but she didn't draw. Not yet. She strained to hear footsteps, breathing, anything. But the night settled into that eerie, suffocating quiet that comes after something moves away quickly. She backed toward her car, each slow step echoing against the tight drumbeat of her pulse. When she reached the door, she scanned the tree line one more time. Nothing. She slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and exhaled shakily. Whoever had been watching her wasn't a curious neighbor. They'd moved too deliberately, observed too quietly, vanished too fast. Either she had rattled someone with her digging, or someone had been following her long before she noticed. She didn't go home that night. She drove straight to the station, pulled the blinds closed in the cold case review room, and pinned a fresh sheet of paper to the corkboard. At the top, she wrote one name, Walter Griggs. Underneath, she added 3 bullet points. Connected to Ethan's ignored call, silhouette in the August 3 photograph, last seen in town mid-1990s, vanished entirely. Then she added a 4th, possible surveillance of investigator. The word possible felt polite, too polite. Brannon spent hours digging deeper, running old address lookups, company databases, state records, even obituary searches. Nothing. Griggs didn't own a home anywhere, didn't have a listed phone, didn't file taxes under that name for decades. He didn't exist in any meaningful way.
But people don't disappear cleanly without help. Around dawn, she found something small, strange, and chilling. A news clipping from 1996 about the Ridgefield Police Department restructuring. Buried in the second paragraph was a list of names removed from payroll due to transfers, resignations, or administrative closures. 3 names. One was Griggs, but another caught her eye. Chief Deputy Ron Hensley. The same Hensley who was now police chief. Brannon stared at the name, remembering the hesitation in his voice when she'd brought up Griggs, the way he'd paused, the slight hitch before he answered her questions. How much had he known back then? And why had he left the department the very same year Griggs vanished? The hallway outside the review room creaked. Brannon tensed. Chief Hensley appeared in the doorway, leaning on the frame, jaw tight. "You're here early," he said quietly. "So are you." "Old habits," he said. "Case like this gets under your skin." He walked inside and glanced at the corkboard. "You're chasing a ghost, Leah." "No," Brannon said firmly. "I'm chasing a man who erased himself." Hensley sighed deeply. Then, without looking at her, he said, "There are things about this town, about that year, that you don't understand." "Then explain it." He met her gaze. "You don't want those answers." Before Brannon could push further, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A voice, shaky, hoarse, whispered, "Stop digging." Her blood ran cold. "Who is this?" Silence. Then the voice repeated, softer, almost pleading, "Stop." The line disconnected. Brannon stared at the phone, skin prickling. Chief Hensley raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" She slipped the phone into her pocket. Wrong number. A lie. A necessary one. She left the station as the sun climbed over the rooftops. Ridgefield looked peaceful in the morning light, but she felt none of it. She drove out to the one place she hadn't visited yet, Ethan Mercer's grave. The cemetery sat on a small rise overlooking the river, rows of modest markers lined beneath tall pines. Ethan's headstone was simple, identical to dozens of others. She knelt beside it. "You tried to tell someone," she murmured, "and whoever listened made sure no one ever heard you." A jay screeched from a nearby branch. Brannon stood, brushing dirt from her knees. She turned to leave. A man stood 10 feet away, older, heavy-set, wearing a high-visibility vest. A groundskeeper. He nodded politely. "Didn't mean to startle you." "It's okay," Brannon said. "I was just leaving." "Are you investigating something?" he asked. She hesitated. "Why do you ask?" "Because folks don't visit Ethan Mercer's grave much. He wasn't from around here long." The man shifted his weight. "But I remember him."
Saw him now and then. You knew him? Brannon asked. Knew of him, the man replied. Quiet kid, nervous, always looking over his shoulder. Looking for what? The groundskeeper shrugged. No idea. But one night, few weeks before he died, he came here, middle of the night. Sat right where you're standing. Stayed for hours. Brannon frowned. Do you know why? He nodded slowly. He said he was scared of someone coming for him. He said he made a mistake. He said he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Brannon's heartbeat quickened. Did he say who? The groundskeeper's face clouded. He said a name. Whispered it, like he was afraid the wind would carry it. Who? Walter, the man said quietly. Name was Walter. Brannon's pulse pounded in her ears. And then Ethan said something that didn't make sense to me at the time, but I ain't forgotten. What was it? Brannon asked. He told me, if anything happens to me, don't let them bury the truth with me. Brannon swallowed hard. When did he say that? A week before he died. And how did he die? The groundskeeper looked at her sadly. Well, that's the strange part, he said. They said it was heart failure. Young guy, healthy, just gone. Brannon felt a shiver crawl down her spine. That night, he continued, I heard cars down by the river. 2, maybe 3. Headlights off. Engines running. Did you see who they belonged to? Too dark, he said. But one sounded like a police cruiser. Brannon stepped back, breath caught in her throat. A police cruiser. Near the river. The week Ethan died. Why didn't you tell anyone? She asked. He looked away. Detective, honestly, I was scared. Same as him. Brannon took a long, shaky breath. Everything was unraveling. Ethan didn't just witness something, he was watched. He was hunted. And the people who should have protected him, the ones with badges, may have been the ones who silenced him. As she turned to leave, the groundskeeper called out, Detective? She paused. If you keep pushing, you might end up like him. Brannon forced a tight, steady breath. Then someone should be scared of me, too. She walked back to our car. And at the far end of the cemetery, half hidden behind a row of cedar trees, a figure watched her, tall, still, silent. Just like before, only this time, they didn't disappear. They waited, as if they wanted her to know they were following her.
Detective Leah Brannon pretended not to notice the figure watching her from the cedar trees. She walked to her car slowly, deliberately, resisting the urge to glance back. Whoever it was wanted her rattled, wanted her to know she was being tailed, wanted her to feel hunted. She wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. But as soon as she drove over the hill and out of sight, she pressed the accelerator harder than she meant to. Her fingers tightened on the wheel, her breath came sharper. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Nothing behind her. No car, no figure, no headlights. But the absence of danger felt worse than the presence. She didn't trust the quiet anymore. She drove straight to the one place where she could think without being seen, the Ridgefield Public Library. It was old, drafty, half-remodeled, and empty on weekday afternoons. She slipped into a corner study room, set her files out, and locked the door behind her. She didn't know how long she sat there staring at the Polaroids taken by Ethan Mercer. All from the same road, same time of day, same angle of approach. If she didn't know better, she'd think they'd been taken by someone waiting for something. Or someone. What was Ethan tracking? Ava? Walter Griggs? Or something more complicated? She pulled up the digital scan of the August 3rd photo and zoomed in on the silhouette again. The broad shoulders, the reflective glint near the chest. She whispered to herself, "That's not a security pin. It's too small, too distinct." Then she remembered something. Old Ridgefield officers in the 90s wore metal nameplates, thin rectangles with raised letters. When the light hit them at an angle, they reflected just like the glint in the photo. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't any man. It wasn't a security guard. It wasn't a stranger.
It was someone wearing a Ridgefield police uniform. Someone who walked that road every Wednesday. Someone who watched the youth program end each week. Someone who had been there long before Ava disappeared. A pattern, a routine, a predator hiding behind authority. Her phone buzzed. She jumped, pulse spiking. It was an unknown number again. She answered anyway. Brannon? A voice, male, older, steady, said, "You need to stop before somebody helps you disappear." Brannon kept her voice calm. "Is this Walter Griggs?" Silence. "Tell me why you buried Ethan's call. Tell me why he was afraid of you." Still nothing. Just breathing. "Tell me why you were on Willow Bend Road on August 3rd. The breathing grew harsher, angrier. Then the voice spat, "You don't know what you're stepping into." "Then educate me." Click. The line went dead. Brannon stared at the phone. The room felt colder. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She dialed the lab. "Nina, it's Brannon. I need you to run a test on that brass key fragment we found." "We already did." "I need more," Brannon said. "Check for any wear patterns, any stress marks, anything indicating it was snapped under force." "Give me an hour." She hung up. For the first time since reopening the case, Brannon felt genuinely afraid. Not for her career, not for the case, for herself.
Someone didn't just want her to stop. Someone wanted her gone. She gathered her files, unlocked the study room, and stepped into the main library aisle, and froze. A man stood near the exit, tall, broad, wearing a faded baseball cap pulled low, the same silhouette she'd seen at the duplex. The same one watching her at the cemetery. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even pretend to browse the books around him. He was waiting for her. Brannon didn't hesitate. She pivoted, walked straight to the side door, shoved it open, and stepped into the sunlight. She jogged to her car, heart pounding, unlocking the door with shaking hands. When she slammed the door shut, she looked up. The man was now at the side door of the library, still staring, still silent, still watching. She started the engine and sped away. She didn't stop driving until she reached the Ridgefield Police Department. She parked, locked the doors, and practically ran inside. Whatever this was, whoever was stalking her, they knew where to find her everywhere else. This building was the only place she still believed she held some advantage. She went straight to Chief Hensley's office. He looked up from his paperwork, startled by the urgency on her face. "Chief, someone is following me." Hensley's expression darkened. "Who?" "I don't know." "Tall, broad, wearing a cap. Same man 3 times in 24 hours. Did he threaten you?" "Not verbally." "Then how do you know it's the same man?" "Because he wants me to know. He's not hiding, he's watching." Hensley leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "Leah, I told you this case is dangerous terrain. That's not good enough. I need to know what you're not telling me about Griggs." He met her stare, but didn't answer. Something in his silence tightened her chest. "Chief," she said quietly, "what happened in 1994? He closed his eyes. "Leah, I don't want to make you choose between protecting you and honoring something that should have been buried a long time ago." Her heartbeat went cold. "What does that mean?" Hensley looked away. "It means you're not the only one being watched." Before she could press further, her phone buzzed again. It was Nina from the lab. Brannon stepped into the hallway to answer. "What did you find?" Nina's voice trembled. "Detective, that key wasn't just snapped. It was cut. Cleanly. Deliberately. So someone destroyed the lockbox with tools?" "Yes, and there's something else. We analyzed the microscopic debris wedged into the groove. And? It wasn't soil or rust. What was it?" Nina hesitated, then said, "Chief's office sawdust. The kind used for the hardwood trim in the Ridgefield PD renovations, mid-90s. Custom cut." Brannon's breath left her in a sharp exhale. The lockbox had been broken open in the police station. She felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "And detective," Nina added, "yes, we found one more thing." "What?" "A flake of enamel paint. Color code 311C. Brannon knew the code instantly. It was the exact shade of paint used on Ridgefield patrol cars in 1994. Her stomach twisted. Someone with access to the cruisers. Someone with access to evidence. Someone who altered Ethan's hotline call. Someone who shut down the lead. Someone who stood in the background of Ethan's photograph. Someone who just warned her to stop digging. She hung up the phone and turned slowly toward Chief Hensley's office door. Her pulse thundered. The ugly truth was rising to the surface. The question wasn't whether Walter Griggs was involved. It was whether he was working alone, or whether someone else in that building was protecting him still.
Detective Leah Brannon didn't walk back into Chief Hensley's office right away. She stood outside the door, heart pounding, replaying every moment she'd shared with him since reopening the case. Hensley had inherited this department long after 1994, but he'd been there that year. He'd been young, ambitious, trusted. And now she knew the truth. The lockbox was broken inside the police station, the keys scraped against cruiser paint, and the residue matched the very trim installed during the department remodel. Someone inside those walls had destroyed evidence. Whether it was Hensley or someone he was protecting, she didn't know yet. But she wasn't going in blind. She stepped away from the door, took the back stairs, went to the evidence locker, and grabbed the tin box again. She placed it on the table in interview room 2, closed the door softly, and turned off the overhead lights. Darkness pooled around her. The faint hum of the station's air conditioning filled the silence. And then she waited. If someone was following her this closely, they would come. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then the door handle clicked. The room stayed dark. Brannon didn't move. She let her eyes adjust. The door cracked open an inch, then swung wider. The silhouette of a man slipped inside, shutting the door behind him. Tall, broad, wearing the same baseball cap. The stalker. He stepped forward, slow and careful. "You should have stopped," he murmured. His voice was low, but familiar. Brannon's pulse seized. "Take off the hat," she said. He didn't move. "Take it off," she repeated, her hand drifting toward her weapon. The man hesitated, then lifted the cap. Her breath caught. "Griggs," she whispered. Walter Griggs looked older, harder, but unmistakable. Deep creases carved his face. His eyes were dull, ringed with sleeplessness. He looked like a man who'd been living in the shadows for decades and surviving on borrowed time. "You shouldn't have come back," she said. He glanced at the tin box. "That shouldn't have been found."
"You destroyed the lockbox," Brannon said. "You burned whatever was inside." Griggs shook his head, slow, bitter. "No, I didn't burn it. I only helped hide it." "So who burned it?" Brannon asked. Griggs didn't answer. "Ethan Mercer?" she pressed. He laughed quietly, a hollow sound. "No. Ethan was scared, but he had a conscience. He didn't hurt that girl." Brannon's fingers tightened. "Then who did?" Griggs' eyes lifted to hers, heavy with a truth he'd carried too long. "You already know." Brannon froze. A chill crept over her skin. "No," she whispered. "It can't be him." Griggs stepped forward, voice raspy. "He was your mentor, right? Taught you everything you know, held this department together for years." His expression twisted. "But even the best men can do terrible things when they think they're untouchable." Brannon shook her head, though every instinct screamed he wasn't lying. Hensley was the responding officer the night Ava vanished. He had control of the call logs, evidence, the entire operation. He knew how to bury something so deep no one would ever look there. Brannon stared at the wall, numb.
Memories swirled. Hensley showing her old reports, warning her not to dig, reacting too sharply when she mentioned Walter's name. And Ethan, she whispered. He saw Hensley talking to a person in a cruiser the night Ava went missing, near the marsh ditch, close to where her notebook was found. Ethan thought he was helping, thought calling the station was the right thing to do. He laughed bitterly. His call never left the desk. Brandon felt nausea rise. Why didn't Ethan speak publicly? Because Hensley paid him a visit, Griggs said. Told him he'd be arrested for interfering if he spread rumors. Ethan was young, scared. And the photos? She asked. Griggs nodded. He took them after that night. He was trying to document the patrol routes, patterns, hoping he could prove someone was stalking those girls. And the keychain? Brandon asked softly. Griggs swallowed. Ethan found it near the tree line. He kept it, planning to go to the state investigators, but before he could, Hensley confronted him again. Brandon looked up sharply. Did Hensley kill him? Griggs exhaled shakily. I don't know. But I found Ethan in his apartment the next morning. Dead. Heart failure, they said. Healthy 24-year-olds don't die of heart failure. Why didn't you report any of this? Brandon demanded. Griggs' face collapsed into something almost human. Because I was scared. Because he threatened my sister. Because he made it clear he had friends in places I didn't. Brandon's stomach twisted. And why show yourself now? Because you dug up the box, he whispered. And now he knows you're close. Too close. A noise outside the door made both of them freeze. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Deliberate. Brandon reached for her weapon. Griggs pressed himself against the wall, eyes wide with terror. The footsteps stopped. Right outside the door. A second of silence stretched like a noose tightening. Then, a soft, deliberate knock. 3 taps. Brandon aimed her gun at the door. Identify yourself! Silence. The doorknob turned. The door swung open, and Chief Hensley stepped inside. He looked calm, steady. His badge gleamed in the dim light. Detective, he said softly, put the weapon down. Brandon didn't lower it. Did you kill Ava? Hensley's jaw twitched, but his eyes didn't flinch. No, he said, but I know who did. Brandon's pulse hammered. Griggs trembled beside her. Then who? Brandon demanded. Hensley stepped closer, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Walter, he said quietly. Griggs flinched as if struck. You're lying, he whispered. You're twisting this. Hensley's voice remained calm, too calm. You stalked the chapel kids, Walter. Ethan saw you. He called us. I handled the call, and I shouldn't have. I should have turned you in, but instead, I buried it. Brandon felt the room tilt. She didn't know who to believe. The man who confessed too easily, or the man who'd stalked her in silence. Detective, Hensley said, voice smooth as glass. Walter is dangerous. Look at him. He's been following you. He's breaking into the station. He's unstable. Griggs shook violently. He's lying. But before he could finish, Hensley drew his gun. Not at Brandon. At Griggs. Drop it, Brandon shouted. Chief, stop! Hensley didn't blink. Griggs backed away, hands raised, tears streaming. Please, she deserves the truth. A shot rang out. Brandon flinched. Griggs collapsed, blood blooming across his shirt. Hensley lowered his weapon slowly, breath steady, eyes cold. Brandon stared at him, horrified. Self-defense, Hensley said calmly. He attacked me. No, Brandon choked. He didn't. Hensley stepped toward her, and for the first time, she saw the monster behind the badge. You were supposed to drop the case, he murmured. I warned you. Brandon raised her gun. Stay back. Hensley smiled, a small, tired smile. You can't prove anything.
"Oh, yes, I can," Brannon said, voice shaking but fierce. She nodded toward the corners of the room. Hensley's eyes widened as he saw them. Red recording lights. Every corner, every angle. Interview Room 2's audio and video had been on the entire time. He lunged for the door. Brannon fired. One shot. Straight to the leg. Hensley crashed to the floor, cursing. Officers swarmed the hallway seconds later, and everything finally broke open. Hensley was arrested, charged, tried, convicted. Ava's case was reopened, then closed for good. Griggs' death, though tragic, revealed the truth. And Ethan Mercer, after 28 long years, was finally acknowledged as a witness who tried to save a child and paid the price. The town of Ridgefield built a memorial garden behind the chapel. A plaque reads, "For Ava, for Ethan, for those who spoke the truth when it was dangerous." And Detective Leah Brannon, she visits that garden every July. She sits on the bench beneath the pines, and she whispers, "I didn't let them bury you." And the wind, soft through the trees, seems to whisper back, "Thank you."